Tyler Young.
I'm William Huholt. So the beautiful thing about this collaboration is the way that it breaks down some of these barriers and really gets people interacting with the music on their own terms. And
Yeah.
I always feel like giving the audience a sense of ownership over the music is such a special thing to do.
Yeah.
If we can just start by like basic introductions, you know, and then we'll go from there. I don't know.
Absolutely.
William, do you want to go first?
Sure. So I'm William Huholt. I started playing piano when I was 4. And improvisation was kind of always a part of my life as a student, but never really something that I considered seriously making a career out of, in part because I had no formal training in it. And as a young classical pianist, you're taught from a very early age that formal training is very, very important, which it is. But I went to UNC Greensboro for my bachelor's degree. I met Tyler there, and we were kind of just playing in the practice room one day, and that was how the Third String Duo was born. And really kind of our whole style of group improvisation grew out of this sort of chance, almost playful interaction in the beginning. And then from there, I spent a few years out of school. I worked in Greensboro in music retail, actually. And then I moved to Tallahassee, Florida, entered the master's degree in piano performance there, and I'm just starting my doctorate there.
That's at Florida State?
At Florida State,
Okay.
correct, yes. Yeah. That's me.
Go Knowles.
Go Knowles.
Well, my name is Tyler Young. I started out in this wonderful world in Pennsylvania. That's where I was born, and moved to North Carolina in 2001. I started at first playing trumpet in the band.
Trumpet?
Trumpet. I was the best second chair trumpet you would ever have heard in your entire life, really. And so it was 6th grade. I played trumpet the entire year, and I had a friend named Murphy who was playing clarinet, and he was like, I'm only playing clarinet to play saxophone later. And I was like, why? Like, why do you have to take a year of clarinet to play sax? It was some stipulation in the band. And I was like, that's dumb. Like, I just, I don't even have to clean a trumpet. Like, I just throw it together. I just pick it up, I don't even have to practice trumpet. Like, that's easy.
I'm sure your band teacher thought
Again,
that was correct.
We're talking about best second chair.
That's
so
it.
let's
That's
just keep our expectations in line. And so 7th grade rolls around, and I come into first day, sit down, still second chair, I think. Feeling really good. First day of band. I'd practiced like 3 times. And Murphy comes in with this huge case. And I was like, what's in, how many clarinets can you stuff in that case? And he pulls out this wonderful tenor saxophone. So the curve in the neck and everything. And I was like, oh, like that's what I really want to play. Like, I looked at the trumpet and I was like, sorry, dude. It was good, but we have to move on, And so I talked to Murphy. He gave me lessons, played the saxophone rather, 7th grade forward. Started getting quite serious when I was a sophomore in high school. Started taking lessons from David Newton, who played in the West Point Military Band, on clarinet, funny enough. And those were really amazing. He kind of like lit my butt, put the fire under me. And so after that, went to college where I met William, UNC Greensboro. And I remember walking with a friend, and he was like, did you hear this new pianist? That's a freshman this year, like us? I was like, He's real good. He's so good. He's fantastic. He's playing, at the time you were playing Albright. You're playing,
yeah.
Yeah. And it was the coolest piece because you have to, like, there's percussion elements on the piano.
Bolcom.
Bolcom.
Yeah. The other William. Yeah.
So the other William. You see where I got off.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Both Umish, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, perfect. So we're in the same vein here. But it was so cool to me, and I remember that was my first time that I had sat and listened to him play was that Bolcom. And my mind was blown. Like, I was used to like listening to John Mayer and being like, whoa, that's real deep music. But then I listen to him play and I'm like, well, I need to go and practice, and can I play the saxophone now? So it was, it was when you were playing a concerto that we were like playing back and forth some licks, and you were playing some things and everything, and we just ended up playing some music together. And I was working on some music that the licks were quite catchy, and then we would come in and we would just kind of like play back and forth, and it started to be, can we improvise like a little piece off of this? And then it was like, oh wait, I can kind of like pick up what you're putting down, and vice versa, I think. And then the first time we improvised was during a recital our sophomore year. We improvised Happy Birthday, and it was on the fly during a recital that I was giving before I went to Florida State. And William and I were like, okay, so we're gonna do this, maybe. Let's just make a game time decision on it. And we were about to open the doors, and he was like, do you want to do this? Because it wasn't in the program. We were just kind of like going to go in and be like, who has a birthday this week? This is for you, and just play it. And it was one of the most memorable highlights of my musical career. Playing that on a whim, fully improvised, didn't know a key, knew the tune kinda, and then just did it.
And this was still at UNCG.
Yeah, this was still at UNCG, and we were kind of like, let's if we can make something out of this. See you later. I'm going to Florida.
So then you went to Florida State.
I did.
You ended up there, but
ended up there.
Not right away.
No, we have never overlapped since Tyler left UNCG.
It was a bummer.
It was, but actually, I don't think that. I mean, maybe we would have, but I don't know that we would have pursued improvisation with quite the same intensity that we did without all the distance. And I actually haven't really thought about that until this trip, realizing how like distance has always played a role in our musical relationship as well as our friendship.
Yeah.
But when you're thousands of miles apart, Florida and Michigan are not very close together.
Exactly.
So because you went to Florida State and did a master's degree, and now you're at Michigan State.
I did. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
working on your doctorate. So you're in Tallahassee and at least Lansing.
Yeah.
Yet you maintain this duo that you created in your undergrad.
And it would be much more difficult if we were forced to always work within the realm of like fully notated classical music, because it's just much more difficult to rehearse and prepare really high caliber performances when you're separated by that much distance. It's not to say that it's impossible. It's just it would have immediately like presented way more logistical challenges. But honestly, one of the great like delights about this musical language that's grown up is that I can always like tell how much growth has happened for both of us when we go to improvise, and it's been 6 months to a year since the last time that we heard each other, and you can hear all of those musical influences sort of in the musical language that we use.
Really. Well, let's talk about that difference for a little bit, because right now you guys are in residency at the Fine Arts Association in Willoughby, Ohio, and you're concluding your second of 4 stints today. Your first stint, you first gave a recital and then did some workshop things, went out to a school. In that performance, the Wednesday night, you started with about a 20-minute improvisation. And then on the second, we'll say half of the recital, the other 2/3, I think, if you actually do the math right, you performed the Rachmaninoff Sonata for cello and piano on baritone saxophone with piano. And William, you were just talking about how, because of the distance, it's a little more, improvisation is very conducive to that particular setup, because when you get together, there isn't all of that prep work that goes into preparing traditionally composed music. And yet, in this first performance that you did in Willoughby, you guys pull out one of the most challenging pieces of 2-person chamber music that's out there. Talk about putting that together. We'll get back into the improvisation, but talk about, what it took to put that together in, if I remember correctly, about 4 hours of rehearsal together the day before.
Well, just having flashbacks.
We did. We really wanted to bring it for the first concert. I was talking to Tyler beforehand. Like the artist residency is such a I mean, we hope that it's a really good thing for FAA, but frankly, it's a really, really good thing for us because we've never had the opportunity to work with students over the course of a whole year where we're kind of popping in and out of their lives, checking in, saying, you know, hey, here's some ideas. We'll be back in a few months and, we'll push you a little bit further along the way. So it's a really, really special thing. You don't even get that as a college teacher or anything like that, you know? So that's really cool. And so for the first concert, we really wanted to kind of take the things that the duo does, I think, the very best, which is improvisation along classical lines and the performance of like really high level repertoire, and just do that as well as we could. So yeah, it was tough, but yeah, it was more of a more of a sprint than a marathon. Yeah. Because like you said, we put it together in like a day of rehearsing. The special thing about that is, much like in improvisation, you have to just rely on your partner completely because you know, it's too late to change things at that point in time. Yeah. When you're
well, so let's can we unpack that a little bit, because there's that day of rehearsing together, right? But I mean, I certainly know that's not all that went into that, right?
Yeah.
So there's obviously your individual preparation ahead of time, but then I imagine you were probably having conversations about it too.
Yeah.
Right. Well, before you traveled,
Tyler played the last movement of it in a competition. And I accompanied him for that. So we had already done one movement of it, which I don't want to say is the most challenging movement, but it's one of them. One of the four. There's 4 movements. But so we had a little bit of a head start. We met over the summer to read it down. I will be very frank and say that the piano part was not in my fingers at that point. So we weren't really able to do like high level detailed work. It was sort of just sketching out the piece. And then it was just a couple of months of like hard individual practicing, and then we put it together.
Showtime. Yeah. That's how it was. I mean, in William's defense, his part is a lot more technically challenging, I think.
It's very dense.
Very, very, very dense. Mine is challenging in different ways, but that was something that was kind of accomplished again through those months and months of preparation, getting that together, and also, you know, having a knowledge on how William kind of will maybe interpret something in the moment, and if we're off on something, then it's just our ability to fix that is something that I think is expedited because we've just been playing together for a while. So it's, you know, in the moment we're rehearsing it and it's like, oh, we're not getting this quite right. This is how I'm doing it. And I'm like, okay, sounds good. Let me just see if I can shift to make that make sense. Or this is how I'm doing it. Okay, let me see if I can take more time here. And then it works out and it's good. Move on. Next.
How much do you think your history and time spent improvising together influences your ability to put together very complex, traditionally composed chamber music quickly?
For me, a lot, because improvising together for as long as we have has granted me kind of an insight on how he perceives music fundamentally. So I'm able to be like, oh, wait, okay, so this is a place where William could do this or this. And if I'm paying attention, I can really, you know, if I'm not right, the ability for me to switch to what is correct is instant. And I'm like, oh yeah, he's going to do this. And then, you know, it works out. And so I think that's been really, really helpful in the amount of times that we've kind of played together, in the amount of tours that we've been on, the drives that we've taken, the trips that we've taken, the times that we've hung out together has been really, really helpful in kind of like getting this glimpse in how William perceives things musically. That has helped me a lot because I'm kind of like, oh, okay, let's see. I don't know what to expect necessarily, but I know how to change my expectation quickly if that was a thing. And so that's been massively helpful for me personally.
One thing that improvising has really taught me about chamber music is that the hierarchies of any kind of ensemble playing are always fluid. And, you know, there's always a system of cues and gestures that musicians use to communicate with each other non-verbally on stage, but the roles are constantly changing kind of in the throughout the evolution of the piece as it's being played out. And this is as true in a Haydn, string quartet as it is in something super gnarly and new, or even something that's not even written down. And I think it's especially obvious when we improvise because sometimes I'm aware that I'm leading the evolution of the piece as it's sort of unfolding, and then other times my job is just to create space for you to do the same. And
Right.
and we kind of trade back and forth these roles of follower and leader. I think that when you play notated music, it's easy to kind of fall into like rote roles and then not probe the boundaries of those roles. So maybe you just always look at the first violinist and then they give you the cue and you do the thing.
Oh, definitely.
But if you look at the very best ensembles or the very best orchestras, they're constantly the roles are constantly shifting. Different lines are coming to the fore, and sure, there's people who are mediating these exchanges, like conductors, section leaders, principal players, but it's constantly a fluid thing. Everybody's engaged in essentially the same act.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Great. So one of the things that I've really enjoyed in watching your improvised performances, both yesterday and a month or so ago, whenever that was, in September, is the way in which you involve your audience in the creation of these brand new, essentially composed on the spot, pieces of music. So I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about the different methods or different ways of generating your ideas that you have that do involve the folks that are there to hear what you're doing.
Mm-hmm. A lot of these ideas have stemmed from this initial germ that we both had together in a coffee shop in Greensboro. We were talking about a potential music festival that we were going to put on. And we were like, if we were to put on a music festival, what would it look like? And then we started talking about what would the duo look like if we had like a mission statement, or if we had kind of like, what do we want to do? And we ended up with this cool slogan, make new music together. And I think that is something that is fundamental. We're always looking for ways to incorporate audience participation in our work because this improvisation shouldn't only be limited to the performers. There's this triangle, pyramid rather, of importance in terms of music that William talks about so eloquently. Where
Is this the holy triangle that you
Yes.
guys talk about on your website?
Not the kind of
Yes.
triangle you play
Right.
percussion section or something. Although that's a very special triangle.
Yeah,
That
it's
is very-
the three. Correct me if I'm wrong. The 3 points are it's performer, composer, and then listener.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's it. Yeah, and this was something that William, I think, really described well and really dived quite deep into, and something that I really deeply resonate with as well, where the performer and the listener, right? We're talking about an audience being not just a passive kind of component to this process. They're an active, the pyramid is, every party is active in the music making process. And what we're doing is putting music at the top of the pyramid where everything else is contributing to that. That's the culmination, that's the tip. And so we're just kind of using our ideas to, the whiteboard. Many things can go on the whiteboard. The popular songs, which people know, and they can actively be like, oh, wow, I remember listening to this. I remember hearing this. I remember learning about this. I know this song intimately. And then surprise is easier to adjust to. Surprise is more rewarding when you know a little bit about what underlines the surprise. And that's something that I think we feel immense gratification when that happens. And when an audience member is like, oh, yeah, I heard that. And that was something that I didn't expect to hear, but I did hear. And it was like, I'm like, cool, now you're kind of living in our world a little bit. Now we can make new music together, right? And so that's hopefully describing. I would love to hear if you have thoughts pertaining to this, but I that's what I think about when we were, including audiences in these performances that way.
So when you talk about the popular tunes, you're talking about this concept that you guys have of this suite on familiar tunes, right?
Yeah.
Where you just kind of grab song titles from
Right.
the audience that could range from something as simple and elementary as, say, Twinkle Twinkle, to something perhaps as complex as the Olympic fanfare,
Right.
And then you'll get any number of those, and each of them then serves as a movement. Is that right? And
Right.
then what do you, William? What do you do with those themes then? Those tunes?
I mean, you put them basically through compositional development. So you might take something
On the spot, right there.
on the spot. Yeah, you might take a melody that's comprised of a few short musical phrases and break it down into motives. So maybe only 2 or 3 notes, or a rhythmic cell. So something that's just derived from the original source material. And then you put that through what classical musicians call development. So that might mean transposition, inversion, augmenting the duration of the notes, so something quite short becomes longer. Or it can be something that is a little freer. So you might create melodies that are reminiscent of the original segment, but are in opposition to it in some way. And
Like taking a major melody, for example, and making it minor.
right, transforming it in some way. Liszt was really the greatest, or I should say the one of the composers who made this technique like at the forefront of his music. But taking a melody that's very, sweet and charming and suddenly making it like crazed and demonic, or doing something vice versa, and sort of crafting a musical journey out of these transformations of themes. And I think this is where you were talking about, like, where do you get ideas from? You can use the concept of like thematic transformation, and take your listeners on a journey through like different musical landscapes. And there, I think you're really only limited by how much music you know and listen to. For me, like the more music I listen to and the more music I learn, the more ideas I have about different ways you can transform themes and sort of different musical styles or languages, even things as simple as textures or accompanimental patterns, little just things that you can use to vary the source material that you work with, and to craft something that's unique and has a distinctive musical meaning behind it. That's really what we want to do tonight at the workshop, and with the students, is sort of look at how many different kinds of musical patterns are there, and what can we how can we distill these down? How can we use them in different contexts than where we originally encountered them? Historically, musicians called this partimento, where you have like different patterns or different phrases or musical gestures that you can use in different combinations to create something unique.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
If I remember correctly, in your first performance at Fine Arts, your improvised sonata, you asked the audience just for a couple of notes, and I think the first one was A.
Yeah.
It was very apropos.
Right.
That was really cool, honestly, because the piece grew out of like our tuning note, which we actually needed to play. So I gave Tyler a concert A, and then I realized, like, wait, that's the first note of the piece.
You could just keep
and
going.
I just decided, like, I almost didn't, because I just wasn't sure. We had never really done anything like that before. And for me, I think that one of the most powerful tools you have as a performer is like physically setting your music apart in some way. So saying, like, hey, here's the start of a piece, and not confusing the audience with that. But in this case, I was like, it's just too perfect.
It was kind of the point almost in that moment.
Yeah. That was really special.
I remember playing the recording for my wife, who's a violist and classically trained like you guys. I don't know that she's ever improvised, certainly not at the level you do, but probably about as much as I have, which is not a whole lot.
Yeah.
And I played that recording, and we were just searching around for the beginning of the piece. You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
And then we're like, oh wait, that was it. Yeah. And she's like, I thought they were tuning. I said, I thought they were tuning too. It turns out you were.
Yeah.
And it just kind of segued right into it.
Yeah.
So then you took, you took these notes and created motives out of them and into this. I think what was a 3-movement sonata.
Yeah.
It could have been
4 movement.
4. You guys do like doing 4 movement.
It was a taco. 3 into 4.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's this moment. I think it was in the third movement. I'm going to do my best. Michael Jordan documentary thing and give you an
great.
iPad. It's queued up, and this, when I've listened to the recording of especially this section a number of times, because it just struck me, because you've taken motives that you've created based on simple notes that you got from the audience.
Yeah.
A being the first, I think C, there were others. And, at this point you're about 13 minutes into the piece, from those tiny little building blocks, and you've already crafted shape. There's been, different sections and different moods and things, but then here you get to this spot and then something just changes in an instant. And there's this like massive build up to this climactic moment.
Yeah.
That then, sort of releases all the tension, but not quite. And I've got some questions, but I'll let you guys just hit the play button and check that out.
Hey, there we are. Got that.
Oh, sorry.
So there's a couple of things in there that just really struck me that if you guys could unpack, I think it'd be really, really interesting.
Yeah.
One of course is that obvious climax there that William, you just kind of like, we're going to slow down. This is going to, this is going to be that moment in this portion of the piece. And Tyler, I think you took that cue and kind of went with it. I'd like to hear about how that comes to be, but what, as I listened to it a couple of times, there was actually a moment about 7 seconds earlier that grabbed me even more, that struck me as, and just, it brought questions to my mind of how did that happen? Because getting to the climax, that I could kind of figure out with my own musical training. William was like, this is gonna, and then you just kind of let it, and then it went, right? But there was that 7 seconds before where da dee dee da da ba dee, and then all of a sudden ba da dee da 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 da, and you both hit it at exactly the same time, changed mood on a dime to set up this massive climax.
Yeah.
How does that happen in an improvisation?
I don't know that I know the answer to that question. It's a very good question. And all I can say, I mean, from my perspective, is that it never quite feels like that in the moment. It's always super interesting to listen back to these improvisations because typically they sound radically different than my experience of them unfolding. Because and I'm speaking for myself again, but I'm usually aware of a lot of variables that the audience isn't. Like, oh no, this harmony was unexpected, or wow, I feel like this is kind of boring, I should probably change the texture. And all of this is ideally hidden away so that people don't perceive it. And instead what comes out is music that sounds like, it's like flowing along and has some destination in mind. I think though the best improvisations are the ones that grow out of when we're both kind of listening to the same thing, which is the music unfolding. And I think that when you talk about creating musical forms, which we did in the first session, you don't necessarily start out with some kind of rigid plan in mind, like, oh, I'm going to do one thing for 3 minutes, I'm going to transition to a second style for 2 minutes, and then we're going to go back to the first style. But instead, you're kind of watching the piece as it evolves, looking for opportunities and similarities between musical materials or between musical sections, keeping in mind what you just played, but also sort of paying attention to what's happening right now, and then just following the music as it goes. And that's how I think we end up with these moments of synergy, because we both read each other very well. Yeah. And then when these opportunities present themselves, then sometimes we find them together, and that's our journey into a contrasting section or a contrasting phase of the piece.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because I listened to that and now I'm like, that could have gone many different ways. And the way that it did go was part luck, but also part good intuition on our end. Because if you wanted to explain that musical germ, right, that was the musical germ for the piece, those two notes. And the thing is that also reflects the Rachmaninoff, right? And so we had this musical germ that we made this piece of music out of. And it's good because that little 2-note phrase contains what I like to really talk about, tension and release in music. And based on what perspective that you're looking at that from, you can find a lot of tension in the first note and release on the second one. Ba, ba, right? And so it was really, really helpful to have William. I was very intently listening to him building this up, and I knew he was going to build it up and resolve it. And what I wanted to was, it would be tricky because in a ritardando, it's very hard to ritardando exactly together when you're not one person. But what you can utilize that for is a monstrously effective suspension.
Right.
Which is what I did, because William was going bum, 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 right? And my job isn't necessarily to hit it together then with him. My job is to then make that suspension over the bar line. And so that's what I was thinking about, because the decision changed in mid-performance. And so it's helpful because right before that, we had a moment where we hit everything together. I think he hit like this polychord, and then I hit this descending scale at literally the same time. So
yeah, that was the moment.
It was the moment that we didn't need to do that again. Repetition legitimizes, but that was such a legitimate moment that you can then utilize the suspension as the contrast and the attention grab of the music. So we're all thinking about the split in time, which is why this can be kind of tiring sometimes.
Yeah.
I don't know how we're able to do an hour and a half recital, but don't get me started on it.
Because you just spent collectively probably, I'll have to go and look at the tape, but like 3 or 4 minutes explaining what you did in 7 seconds.
Right.
Yeah.
All that thought process that legitimately goes into making those musical decisions in a moment.
Right.
All gets condensed into such a short amount of time.
Right.
This is why composers have such a hard job, and I really, truly appreciate them for what they do. Because, I mean, one of the beautiful things about improvisation is that if something happens and you're not sure that you love it, you don't really have a choice. Like, you have to make it work in some way.
You do.
And, that's why I think the most successful improvs are always like in high pressure situations, because you're forced to unlock a slightly different level of intensity of listening to the music as it unfolds. It's really cool to hear moments like that. Also, music is such a subjective thing. I mean, you can try as a performer to point out what you think are the most important musical elements, like the melody, or like, wow, this is where the opening theme returns, or something like that. But usually I feel like as a listener, you kind of only agree on like 2 or 3 really big moments in a piece. Like, yeah, this is the recapitulation, or hey, the theme's coming back now, but there's a lot of ambiguity in composition as well. A lot of like passages that are just there to move you to new music. Mahler 2, I think, is a great example of this. There's like 10 minutes of the last movement that's just there to make it even more epic and long, so that the ending is as glorious as it can possibly be. But I don't think that if you cut out like a couple of measures, I don't think anybody would really know. So there's moments like that in improvised music as well, where you're finding a voice together. And then when you actually arrive at those moments, that's when I think that's where some of the skill is in seizing those opportunities and really like creating something out of that that's, unified.
Yeah.
So you guys have the last part of your second stint for the residency tonight on this workshop at Fine Arts, and then you'll be back in February and April. What's, as William, as you finish up your studies in Florida, and Tyler, as you do in Michigan, what's next for you guys and for the Third String Duo?
So for me, finishing up the doctorate, of course, we're probably looking at another year from this point until the doctorate is actually finished with documents and everything. But I am also a freelance audio engineer. And so Lansing is proving to be a good place to just stay right now as I'm building connections on engineering work. And that's something that's incredibly fulfilling to me, as well as playing in 3S2. And for 3S2, we're just getting
3S2. That's third string duo. Yeah.
We're just getting past this kind of musical lull due to COVID-19. Right. And so we're getting our, the tires, the the four-wheeler was stuck in the mud. And now we're like pushing it out slowly and surely. But it was like if you left the four-wheeler in the mud for like 2 years. So it's kind of like their gears are a little bit frozen, and getting things moving and keeping up the relationships that the duo had specifically, is proving to be a little bit challenging, but it's making baby steps. That's the really important part. So we'll be back at it and everything. We have a music festival in North Carolina, and we have a lot of performance avenues that we've gone down in the past and just haven't been able to utilize around, out and about. And so performing still, of course, I would love to see a personal like dream of mine, selfishly, is to see a 3S2 method about how to do this. I want to be able to have, a student come into their band director's office and be like, I've been working out of this exercise with so-and-so. Or having a band director be like, hey guys, like we can utilize this method and you can have your own little chamber group as an after school thing. Or that's something that's really, really cool to me, is kind of like, codifying it in some way. I don't know when or where or how, but I feel like we have more than enough material and words about it in order to make that dream a reality. But that's what I'm thinking in terms of 3S2 longevity.
Yeah.
What about you?
I'm definitely thinking about recordings.
Yeah.
Tyler's a phenomenal recording engineer. And so,
little plug, I believe he's going to process all the audio for this particular interview.
So you can judge for yourselves.
I know.
But I would love to make some more recordings.
Yeah.
It's been, I remember making audition recordings with Tyler behind the mics when I was applying to doctoral programs. And, we were like socially distanced, wearing masks because we were both home with our families for the holidays and didn't want to get anybody sick. So yeah, not having to deal with any of that is a real relief now. And so hopefully that opens the doors to make recordings. The cool thing about improvs is that they are, momentary, but that's also sort of the downside, that once they happen, they're over and you never hear them again. So it's nice to have recordings.
Yeah.
And then I'm working on a lot of interesting solo music right now. I'm also doing a lot of teaching in Florida through my assistantship. And teaching is just something I've always suspected that I would love doing, but now that I have the opportunity to do it at a higher level than before, it's really, really amazing, and something I hope to keep doing in the future. So teaching, recording, performing, that's kind of what's in the works.
Is there a dream of reunifying geographically so that so the third stream can really
we try
off?
Like almost every year,
Yeah.
Maybe it's like the hand of God keeping us apart, like
well, the dream really is, I feel like there's opportunity for like the Carnegie Hall debut. I feel like there's opportunity for like a Concert Artists Guild attempt. Like I feel like there's opportunity for us to really achieve these stages that I grew up looking at, and that would be something for the duo where I'm like, oh yeah, like when you can go to New York City and play in a hall in Carnegie Hall or something like that, and just have an audience that they're like, whoa, I've never seen that stuff. We usually hear Dover String Quartet come, which are phenomenal, by the way, but it would just be magical for that kind of opportunity to kind of, be a part of the duo's history, because I think it's really important music making. And I've been convinced of it more and more and more and more the more you dive into it. So yeah, if you're out there and you want to do some improvisation, please do.
There you go.
And the flip side is I feel like COVID has really taught me about being content with with how things are. And it's just such a joy to make music like this in front of other people, and to get like one of my long held principles about music is that it's for everybody. It's not just for learned scholarly musicians who have spent years and years devoting their lives to this craft. It's something that can reach anybody, and there's just some impediments in the way when it comes to classical music. Is the listeners tend to be seated in a more passive way than they are at a rock concert or something. The atmosphere tends to be more restrained, and all of these are not bad things necessarily, but they can sometimes create artificial barriers between people who don't know the music as well and people who do. And so the beautiful thing about this collaboration is the way that it breaks down some of these barriers and really gets people interacting with the music on their own terms. And I always feel like giving the audience a sense of ownership over the music is such a special thing to do.
Definitely.
So I'm grateful to just make this music anywhere, really. Yeah. That's what it comes down to.
That's perfect.
Yeah.
Well, we're thrilled, that you're here in Northeast Ohio for a couple of days now, and you'll be back in February and April. Yeah. It's been a delight to watch you guys play and work with students of varying ages, and to bring the audience into those performances has really been something special. It was really neat to see the whiteboard performance last night. When people were literally writing ideas for the piece on the whiteboard while the piece was being played.
I know. Yeah.
And watching you kind of evolve with that. It was just fascinating. Thanks for taking the time, today. I've got to jet and get set up for your next thing. So
thanks, Mike.
But this has been an absolute pleasure. And we'll talk again soon, I'm sure.
Likewise.
Same for us.
Yeah.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely.
Clapping music.
I don't even know it.